Investors are on the edge of their seats as the first big tech IPO of the year set to begin trading any moment now. Reddit, you can see the mascot Snoo on your screen right there, is expected to start at the higher end of, well, it priced right around $34 a share. Now this comes after shares of the company Astera Labs jumped 72% in its public debut yesterday. We want to bring in Don Butler. He is Home Ventures Managing Director. Don, it's great to see you here. So we saw Reddit price at the top end of its range. Lots of excitement ahead of that first trade. What do you think we'll see today?
I actually think we'll see a similar sort of jump during the market day. One of the things we found is that oftentimes I think the metric of a good IPO from a banking standpoint is something like a 10% pop the first day. And so when I see the 17 from yesterday, I think that feels an indication of both the investor interest in new issuance, but also I think with Reddit in particular, you've got sort of this combination of both a well-known consumer brand, the first sort of public offering in several years of one of the, in effect, sort of a social network. And then on top of that, you have sort of data revenues coming in from AI. And so I think AI licensing. And so I think what you're going to see is you're going to see investors who see this as a way to buy into the next wave of generative AI, aside from the means that they've had thus far. Thus far you've had companies like NVIDIA and others, and those have had a great run. But I think this gives investors a new chance to sort of buy into the next generation of technology here.
Yeah, Don, so we've had a lot of companies say that they're playing around, experimenting with, or putting some of their own capital towards R&D with regard to generative AI, either for productivity or for solutions that they could put into the market. How can Reddit come out and prove that to the street over time?
Well, so, if you remember, they had this licensing deal that they announced with Google that was something on the order of like 60 million for the first year. And basically they can use their data to help train large language models. And I think the thing that'll be interesting is to see the training revenues. One, can they extend this to other? Can they build on those revenues with other large language model developers? And two, will we see that the way that large language models evolve? Will it be a continuous training, and therefore each successive model that is built doesn't need to sort of access the full data set of that is out there, such as Reddit's data, or can it build off of its sort of existing learnings and go from there? And so I think what you'll see is in the first year, I think they're one of the few companies that actually has like material revenues that you can point to related to generative AI that is substantive. But then will that continue and build next year and the year beyond? I think that's the thing that's going to be really interesting to watch here.
Don, when it comes to some of the volatility that's expected because of the shares that they were offering to some of their users here, are some of those fears valid, or do you think the expectation that it's going to add to this volatility might be a bit overblown at this point?
My own experience in buying in, I worked for a company that offered a direct share program, bought in that. And in that case, as an employee of the company, as opposed to here where you have sort of early participants in the ecosystem, my experience has been that the people who benefit from those tend to be the people who have been with the company the longest, or in this case, the people who've been posting on Reddit or moderating forums for the longest period of time. And I actually tend to think that they'll be more loyal to the platform. Like I think I think you'll see some volatility because of the broader investor demand. I think that'll lead to a jump. And yes, you might see some people sell some of their shares, but I don't think it'll be quite as dramatic of a sell-off as others have indicated. My own experience was, the people who understood the company the best and sort of were aligned with the long-term success of the company the most tended to be people like the folks that I think are going to be participating in the directed share program.
And Don, when we think about Reddit as a company and how it's defining itself versus companies that went public prior to it, Pinterest didn't want to be looked at as a social media company. Snap said they were a camera company when they went public.
That's
how
right. Yeah.
should the street be evaluating Reddit as a company?
It's funny. When I think of analogs, I actually think of folks like Pinterest. So I think that's actually quite accurate. One of the things that and to give you an example of why that is, it's interesting. We used to do quite a bit of investing in the ad tech industry. So as I was looking at the IPO, I reached out to friends of mine who were still placing advertising inventory at consumer brands and said, what's the experience of being an advertiser on Reddit? How does that compare to other brands? And, basically it's like, well, it's sort of similar to buying on Pinterest or similar to buying on Nextdoor or these other communities where you have very high engagement, but at the same time, it's not the performance marketing machine that you have with companies like Meta or Google or Amazon these days.
Really interesting stuff. Don Butler, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here. Again, we are expecting the first trade of Reddit any minute now. Don Butler of Tomvest Ventures, Managing Director. Thank you.
Thank you.